What if I told you that the most powerful fertilizer on the planet costs practically $0, takes 24 hours to make, and literally brings dead soil back to life in a matter of weeks? What if this secret is hidden in the most ordinary place that most people ignore or squeamishly avoid? 1 cup of worm castings mixed with water gives you a liquid that contains more beneficial bacteria than the best $50 commercial fertilizers. Organic farmers pour this liquid on their fields and get harvests that make their neighbors' jaws drop. And today we'll break down the full science of aerated vermicompost tea. I'll show you the exact recipe made from things most people already have at home, tell you why scientists call it a biological inoculant, and reveal the shocking research results showing how this tea kills fungal plant diseases without a single gram of chemicals. And at the very end, I'll reveal the main secret of why most people make vermicompost tea wrong and kill all its benefits without even knowing it. Watch to the end and subscribe to the channel because this information is literally worth hundreds of dollars a year in saved fertilizer costs, and I want you to use it correctly. Let's start with the fundamental question that everyone asks when they hear about this for the first time. Why worm waste specifically? Why not just compost tea from a regular compost pile or a nettle infusion or diluted chicken manure? What makes worms so special? The answer lies in what happens inside the worm. When an earthworm or a red wiggler, the most popular species for a home farm, consumes organic waste, it passes it through an incredibly complex digestive system. This system isn't just mechanical grinding. It's a biochemical laboratory that transforms organic material in ways no other composting process can reproduce. Inside the worm's gut live hundreds of species of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms. When organic material passes through the worm, it becomes enriched with these living organisms and the substances they produce, enzymes that break down complex organic molecules, humic and fulvic acids that improve soil structure and make nutrients available to plants, plant growth hormones, including auxins and cytokinins, that stimulate seed germination and root development, and an enormous number of living beneficial microorganisms that become the foundation of a healthy soil ecosystem. A standard compost pile, for all its benefits, produces material that is mostly dead by the time it matures. Most microorganisms die during hot composting. Vermicompost is different. It's alive. In 1 gram of quality vermicompost, there are between 100 million and 1 billion living bacteria. That's comparable to the best probiotics for humans, only for your soil. Vermicompost tea, or worm tea, is a water extract of vermicompost enriched with oxygen during the brewing process. But here's the critically important nuance that most people don't understand, and that I promised to reveal. Not all vermicompost teas are equal. There's an enormous difference between simply soaking vermicompost in water and aerated vermicompost tea, and that difference determines whether you get a powerful biological inoculant or just tinted water. When you simply soak vermicompost in water without aeration, here's what happens. Anaerobic bacteria, those that live without oxygen, begin to dominate. Anaerobic bacteria are precisely the organisms that create putrid odors, produce substances toxic to plants, and can include pathogenic species. Within a few hours without aeration, your vermicompost tea starts to smell like a swamp and can harm your plants instead of helping them. That's just a simple soak, and it's not what we need. Aerated vermicompost tea works completely differently. When you actively oxygenate the water with an aerator like an aquarium pump, you create an environment where aerobic bacteria, the ones beneficial to soil and plants, can multiply exponentially. Over 24 hours of aeration, the population of beneficial aerobic bacteria can increase by hundreds of thousands of times. You are literally growing living fertilizer right in your bucket. The aerobic bacteria in worm tea belong to the same groups as those in healthy soil: Bacillus, Pseudomonas, Azotobacter, and many others. These are organisms that fix nitrogen, dissolve phosphorus, suppress pathogens, and release substances that help plants grow. When you water your soil or spray your leaves with this tea, you're introducing billions of these organisms that immediately get to work. The recipe for aerated vermicompost tea is incredibly simple, and that's exactly what makes it so appealing. You'll need 4 gallons of water, roughly 15 liters, 2 cups of quality vermicompost, a nylon mesh bag, or an old pair of pantyhose, an aquarium aerator with a pump and tubing, and optionally 1 to 2 tablespoons of unsulfured molasses. Start with the water. If you're using tap water, let it sit for 24 hours before adding the vermicompost, or aerate it for an hour using the same aquarium pump. The chlorine in tap water kills microorganisms, and if you add vermicompost to chlorinated water, you'll destroy a significant portion of the biology you're trying to preserve. Rainwater or well water is ideal because it contains no chlorine. Put the vermicompost in the nylon bag, like a fist-sized tea bag, and lower it into the water. Drop the aerator tube to the bottom of the bucket and turn on the pump. Air bubbles should be actively circulating the water. If you want to additionally accelerate beneficial bacterial growth and give them a food source to multiply faster, add the molasses. Molasses is carbon, food for bacteria, that helps them multiply more quickly. Let the system run for 24 hours, not more and not less. 24 hours is the optimal time, long enough for beneficial bacterial populations to peak, but not so long that they begin competing for resources and the system starts to degrade. After 24 hours, your tea should have a slightly earthy, pleasant smell. No rot, no sharp, unpleasant odors. If the smell is unpleasant, something went wrong. Perhaps the pump wasn't powerful enough, the water was too cold, or the vermicompost was low quality. Use the tea immediately after brewing. This is critically important. Living organisms start dying as soon as you turn off the aeration. 4 to 6 hours after shutting off the pump, a significant portion of the biology is already lost. After 24 hours, the tea is practically dead. So brew only as much as you can use in one session. Aerated vermicompost tea can be applied in 2 primary ways, and each produces different results. Understanding when to use each method will let you maximize the potential of this remarkable fertilizer. The first method, soil drenching, is the basic technique. You simply water the soil around your plants with the tea as you would with regular water, but you're actually doing something far more powerful. When billions of beneficial bacteria and fungi enter the soil, they immediately begin interacting with the existing soil ecosystem. They occupy niches that would otherwise be filled by pathogenic organisms. They begin fixing nitrogen, dissolving phosphorus, producing growth hormones. They release acids that break down organic matter, freeing nutrients into a form available to plant roots. Research shows that regular application of vermicompost tea can significantly increase earthworm populations in soil. Beneficial microorganisms from the tea create a more favorable environment for worms, which in turn produce more vermicompost right in the soil. This is an upward spiral of soil improvement that accelerates over time. The second method, foliar spraying, is the one that really blows people's minds. When you spray plant leaves with vermicompost tea, you cover their surface with an ultra-thin film packed with living beneficial microorganisms. These organisms occupy microscopic niches on the leaf surface, precisely the spots where pathogenic fungi typically begin their destructive work. The protective mechanism is double. First, beneficial microorganisms simply physically occupy the space, preventing pathogens from taking hold. Imagine the entire leaf surface covered with tiny guards that keep enemies away. Second, some of these beneficial bacteria, especially Bacillus subtilis strains, produce substances with antibiotic properties that directly suppress the growth of pathogenic fungi and bacteria. For a long time, scientists were skeptical about vermicompost tea. The idea that an infusion of worm excrement could be a powerful fertilizer and plant protection agent seemed too simple to be true. But research conducted over the last 20 years has made even the most skeptical specialists change their views. One of the most impressive research directions concerns the ability of vermicompost tea to suppress powdery mildew, one of the most common and destructive fungal diseases of plants. Powdery mildew attacks cucumbers, squash, zucchini, roses, and many other crops, covering leaves with a white powdery coating and slowing photosynthesis. Traditionally, it's treated with fungicides, but research has shown that regular foliar spraying with aerated vermicompost tea can reduce the spread of powdery mildew by 50 to 70% without any chemical intervention. The mechanism behind this effect involves the microorganisms in the tea, especially Trichoderma and Bacillus species. Trichoderma are fungi that are natural enemies of many pathogenic fungi, including those that cause powdery mildew. When you introduce Trichoderma through vermicompost tea, these beneficial fungi compete with pathogens for space and resources and release substances that inhibit the growth of pathogenic species. Researchers have also studied the effect of vermicompost tea on plant growth and yield. In one representative study, tomatoes watered with vermicompost tea showed faster growth, earlier flowering, and higher yields compared to a control group watered with plain water or chemical fertilizers. Particularly impressive was the fact that root systems in plants receiving vermicompost tea were significantly more developed. Longer, more branched roots mean better access to water and nutrients, especially important during drought conditions. The growth hormones in vermicompost, especially auxins and cytokinins, have a direct effect on plants. Auxins stimulate cell growth and promote root system development. Cytokinins stimulate cell division and promote the development of shoots and leaves. These hormones work at microscopic concentrations, but their effect is unmistakable. Plants receiving vermicompost tea literally grow more vigorously, as if someone pressed an accelerator button. Particularly interesting is research on the effect of vermicompost tea on seed germination. When seeds are soaked in vermicompost tea before planting, or when freshly sown seeds are watered with tea, germination rates and initial seedling growth improve significantly. This is related both to the hormonal effect, which reduces germination inhibitors, and to the fact that beneficial microorganisms protect young roots from soil pathogens that can destroy seedlings right at the start of their lives. Of course, all of the above only makes sense on one condition. You need a source of quality vermicompost. You can buy vermicompost, but it's expensive and inconsistent. The real advantage of the system appears when you have your own worm farm producing a continuous stream of fresh vermicompost literally for free from your kitchen scraps. Creating a basic worm farm is incredibly simple. You'll need a plastic container with a lid 20 to 40 liters in volume. Drill small ventilation holes in the lid and along the sides near the top. Make several drainage holes in the bottom. Set the container on a stand above a tray where liquid will drain, known as worm leachate, which you can also use as fertilizer diluted 1 to 10. Fill the container with moist bedding. Bedding is what the worms live in, a source of carbon and a moist environment all at once. The best bedding is cardboard boxes torn into small strips, soaked in water and well wrung out, mixed with a small amount of soil. Add red wigglers, Icenia fetida, the ideal species for home vermicomposting. Start with 200 to 500 worms purchased from a supplier, and within a few months their population will double or triple. Worms eat almost all organic waste, kitchen scraps from vegetables and fruit, coffee grounds with the filter, tea bags, eggshells, old bread, moistened paper. Don't feed them meat, fish, dairy products, or heavily spiced or salty food. Keep moisture at the level of a damp sponge, not soaking wet and not dry. Keep temperature between 59 and 77 degrees Fahrenheit. After 2 to 3 months, the bottom layer of your container will have transformed into dark, crumbly, nutrient-rich vermicompost that smells like fresh earth after rain. This is exactly the material you'll use to brew your tea. With one medium-sized container, you can produce enough vermicompost to make worm tea once a week for a small vegetable garden. That's a free, renewable source of one of the most powerful fertilizers on the planet running on your own kitchen scraps that would otherwise just go in the trash. Remember, I promised at the very beginning to reveal the main secret of why most people make vermicompost tea wrong. Here it is. Most people focus all their attention on the recipe and the brewing process, but completely ignore the quality of the source vermicompost. Yet it's the quality of the vermicompost that determines 90% of the result. The thing is, not all vermicompost is equal. Vermicompost produced by worms fed a variety of organic materials, is rich in diverse microorganisms. Vermicompost from worms fed only cardboard boxes or only one type of waste is poor in biological diversity, and it's biological diversity that determines the value of the tea. The best vermicompost comes from a mix of green materials rich in nitrogen, kitchen scraps, fresh plant trimmings, and brown materials rich in carbon, cardboard, paper, fallen leaves. When you feed your worms diverse materials, they produce vermicompost with a rich variety of microorganisms, and it's this diverse vermicompost that gives you worm tea that actually works as a biological inoculant. The second secret within the secret, add a small amount of soil from your own garden directly into the tea at the time of brewing. Local microorganisms from your soil are already adapted to your specific conditions. When you add them to the tea along with the microorganisms from the vermicompost, you create a synergistic blend that works even more effectively. Now that you understand what vermicompost tea is and how to make it, let's talk about how to apply it throughout the entire season for maximum effect. Early spring is the time for soil preparation. Start watering your future beds with vermicompost tea 3 to 4 weeks before planting. This gives beneficial microorganisms time to establish themselves in the soil and begin creating a favorable environment for roots. At the same time, start soaking seeds in diluted vermicompost tea, 1 cup of tea to 1 liter of water, for a few hours before planting. You'll see a difference in germination rates. During the active growth period, apply vermicompost tea every 2 to 3 weeks. Alternate between soil drenching and foliar spraying. Foliar spraying is especially important during wet periods when the risk of fungal disease is high. Spray in the early morning so the leaves have time to dry before evening. During flowering and fruiting, this is the most critical time. This is when plants are most vulnerable to stress and disease and when they need maximum support. Increase application frequency to once a week. Pay special attention to foliar spraying, covering leaves on both sides. In the fall, after harvest, water your empty beds with vermicompost tea. This helps restore soil biology after the growing season and prepares your beds for next year. If you plant cover crops, water them with tea right after seeding to help them establish quickly before cold weather arrives. Let's talk economics, because this is one of the most compelling arguments for vermicompost tea. Take a typical home gardener with a 100-square-foot vegetable garden. If they buy commercial organic fertilizers, just fertilizers, not counting plant protection products, they spend $100 to $200 a year. If they add organic fungicides to fight powdery mildew and other diseases, that's another $50 to $100. Total, $250 to $300 a year just on basic fertilizers and protection. Now let's calculate the cost of vermicompost tea. An aquarium pump with air tubing costs about $20 and lasts several years. Nylon brewing bags cost $1 for several pieces. Molasses costs a few dollars per season. Water is practically free. Vermicompost, if you have your own farm, is absolutely free. Your kitchen scraps, which you're throwing away anyway, produce an endless stream of raw material. So in the first year, accounting for the cost of setting up the worm farm, roughly $40 to $50 for the container and worms, and $20 for the aerator, your total investment is $60 to $70. In that very first year, you save a minimum of $200. From the second year on, the system runs almost for free, producing unlimited quantities of vermicompost from your own kitchen scraps. But the financial benefit is only part of the picture. When you switch to vermicompost tea, you stop putting chemicals in your soil. Your soil starts to recover. After a few years, you'll find that your plants are healthier, more resistant to stress and disease, and producing higher yields. And you'll know that you achieved this, not by buying expensive chemicals, but by working with nature, using the oldest cycle on the planet. Organic waste turned by worms into life. 1 cup of vermicompost, 4 gallons of water, an aquarium aerator, 24 hours. That's all it takes to create a liquid containing more living beneficial microorganisms than any commercial fertilizer on the market. A liquid that feeds your plants, protects them from disease, improves your soil, and does all of this practically for free. Vermicompost tea isn't a trendy fad or a marketing trick. It's the application of a fundamental biological principle. Healthy plants grow in healthy soil, and healthy soil is living soil, full of diverse microorganisms. Worms have existed for 600 million years. They survived mass extinctions, ice ages, catastrophes, and all that time they've been doing one thing: turning organic waste into the most nutritious material on the planet. We just need to learn how to use their work. Start today. Build a worm farm, make your first tea, water your plants with it, and watch your garden transform, because when you feed soil the way it was designed to be fed, the results speak for themselves. Thank you for watching to the end. If this video opened your eyes to the power that's literally crawling beneath your feet, please subscribe to the channel. Every week I share equally practical, science-backed, and accessible methods that can transform your garden and your life. Your worms are waiting, your plants are waiting. Start feeding them, right?